So let us start with Lab 16, Authentication and Authorization in MVC. So before we move ahead, let us try to understand what these two words means, authentication and authorization. Authentication means validating the user, in other words checking if the user exists in the database or not. Authorization means does that user have access to a specific resource or a section of the site. For example, let us say you have a user who comes to your site. So the first thing what you do is you check that if the user is existing in your database or in your data source. This process is termed as authentication. Once the user is validated and he starts surfing the site, the next thing is we would like to ensure that he is able to access only those sections of the site for which he is authorized for. For example, if he is authorized to see the admin site, yes, he can surf the admin site. If he is authorized to see the report section, yes, he should see the report section. In other words, we would like to actually check that if the user is authorized for a specific section or not. This process is termed as authorization. In simple words, authorization follows authentication. So first authentication happens and then authorization happens. Now if you remember, in the first video of MVC, I said that MVC uses ASP.NET framework internally. If you remember in the first video, we said that ASP.NET is the main framework, and then on the top of it we have MVC and we have web forms. In other words, whatever features are available in ASP.NET will definitely be available in MVC. So for example, your session variables, your global.asx file, your web.config files, your application variables, and a lot of things from ASP.NET is available automatically into MVC. In the same way, even the security concepts of ASP.NET are used by MVC. So if you remember, right, in ASP.NET, we had three ways of doing security in the previous ASP.NET web forms. One was forms authentication, the other was Windows authentication, and the last one was passport authentication. Now in MVC, forms authentication and Windows authentication has been taken as it is, but the passport authentication has been replaced by a much more better thing called as OAuth, or I'll say open authentication. So we'll talk about open authentication later. In this video, we will concentrate on forms authentication and Windows authentication. Now because this MVC uses the ASP.NET web forms authentication and Windows authentication, my suggestion is to go and see the authentication and authorization videos of ASP.NET web forms, where we have explained how to implement forms authentication, how to implement Windows authentication, how to do single sign-on, etc. In this video, my concentration is to cover forms authentication and Windows authentication using MVC. So let us first start with Windows authentication. Now in Windows authentication, only those users are allowed in the system who are proper Windows user. Now Windows user can be stored in a local Windows operating system, or they can be stored in something called as Active Directory Services, that is ADS. You can think about ADS as a special kind of a database, where Windows users can be stored and the ADS can be accessed via the network. In simple words, Windows authentication is used for intranet based application. Now intranet based applications are used by corporate companies. Corporate companies, which are organizations, where actually you work. So for example, when you join a company, they will actually create your card, your access card. They also go and create your user account, inside the Windows server, that is inside ADS. So in case you want to create a internal intranet application, then Windows authentication is the way to go. So let us first go ahead, and we had created a site. So if you remember, we had this customer site created, right? So let us go and apply Windows authentication to this customer site. So in order to do Windows authentication, we have to go and host this customer application inside IIS, because IIS is the mediator who will connect to the Windows ADS or to your local Windows group and do the authentication and authorization from those systems. In the previous video, we have already seen how to go and host application inside IIS. So that is already done. Now what part is pending? How to go and enable Windows authentication. So let us go step by step and let us see how we can enable Windows authentication in MVC. In order to enable Windows authentication, the first step is we need to go to the web config file and we need to say that we want to use Windows authentication. But now there is a slight confusion here. In one MVC project, we can have two web config files. Now in what scenarios we need two web config files, right? So I will not be explaining you why you need or why you have two web config files in a project. Please go and see the ASP.NET questions and answers video series, where we have one 10 minutes video which explains in what scenarios do you need two web config files in a ASP.NET project. Now remember that this web config file concept belongs to ASP.NET and not MVC. Remember, ASP.NET is the framework and MVC stands on the top of it. So please do go and see the video in the ASP.NET questions and answers video series, where I have explained why we need two web config files in a ASP.NET project. But the Windows authentication we need to enable in the external web config file. You can see here, one web config file is in the views folder. Do not touch that. Take the web config file which is there in your outside folder, right? So the main web config file. So in that we need to go and say that we want to use Windows authentication. So to enable Windows authentication, we need to go to the system.web tag. Now remember, people who have already worked with ASP.NET, this thing is just a revision, okay? But people who have not worked with ASP.NET web forms, right, and they are coming directly here, for them this is a new thing. So here I'll say authentication mode is equal to Windows. So mode is equal to Windows. You can see that we have lots of authentication mode here. Remember that password authentication is not a suitable option in MVC. Okay, so forms and Windows, they are actually continued in MVC. So I'll say okay, enable Windows authentication, and in the authorization I'll say that deny any users who are anonymous. So the anonymous sign is given by this question mark here, right? So these are the two things. One is we have to specify the authentication, and the other one is we have to specify the authorization. And remember, in the start of the video I had said authentication means it validates a user, and authorization means does that user have access to that section, right? Now, as I've said in the previous section of the video, that Windows authentication means the users are stored in either ADS or they are stored either in the local user groups, right? So let us go ahead and let us go to our local user groups. At this moment I don't have a Windows ADS, and that does not matter. So in case you have just installed in your computer this whole thing, your Visual Studio, you can just go to your local user group and create the user. So in case you don't have ADS, you can still do this demo very effectively. Okay, so go to your computer, right click and say manage, and I've done that. So let me go to the local user groups here, and let me go and create a user in my local user groups called as, let's say, QuestPond. Okay, and I'll give some password here. Right, great. Now this user QuestPond should be the only guy who can go and access our customer screen. And you can see there are other users here like Shiv, Raju, or administrator or guest. These users cannot go and access my site. Okay, so I want that if the person comes in and when he puts his username and password, only this user, that is QuestPond, should be able to access my website. And now the next thing is we need to go and use the authorize attribute and decorate our controllers and our actions. Means what? If you see for now, very quickly, if you see our website, very quickly, let me go to my website here. So our website, has this home controller. So what we would like to do, we would like to say that, okay, anybody can come and access the home controller. That is not a problem. But when anybody comes and he tries to click on this add new customer, or he tries to click on this search customer, he should be popped up with a username and password, and he should be validated from the Windows user account, right? So the home controller, we don't want to put any kind of access, but yes, on the customer controller, we would like to put access rights, right? So what we need to do is we need to go to our customer controller here. So let us go back to our customer controller. So let us go to our customer controller here. So now what we'd like to do here is we'd like to go and decorate this customer controller. So on this customer controller, we need to go and decorate it with the authorize attribute like this. So you can see here what it says is that this customer controller class can be accessed only by the QuestPond user. And if you wish, right, you can go and decorate on the action level as well. So for example, you can see here I am saying, okay, nobody can go and call this enter action, nobody can go and call this load action. So you can use this authorize attribute and control, saying that on which action which user can come in, and probably some of the actions will not require probably any kind of access rights, right? But at this moment, yes, I have put authorize attribute at the controller level. So in other words, any kind of functionality which you will try to access from the customer controller, it's going to actually go and validate from the Windows user, right? And if you like if you see the home controller, if you go and look at the home controller currently doesn't have any kind of authorized attribute, right? Great. So that means when somebody comes to my site, he can come happily to the home controller, to the home actions, but when he tries to come and invoke this customer actions here to the customer controller, he would be asked for the Windows user username and the password, right? So let me go and build this. I'll go and rebuild this, and we need to go and publish all these changes to IIS. Remember I said the authentication and authorization from the Windows users is done by IIS. So it is not done by the ASP.NET application. So we don't need to write any kind of code. We just need to go and host this into IIS. So if you remember, already in the previous video, we had published, our project, right? So if you remember, we had created this customer application site here, right? And this customer application site was published. So let me go to my advanced settings here. So it was published on the C drive customer application, right? So what we'll do is, let us go and republish the DLLs over here. So whatever changes we have made, so let us go here and say build and publish customer application, and let us republish this new changes to the site, and let us see if the authentication and authorization through Windows works or not. So there I have clicked on build and I've clicked on publish. So if you remember, we had created a profile called as go live in the previous video. So I'm going to use the same, and I will say publish. So the time I do publish, what he will do is he will go and whatever changes we have done, he's actually taking those changes and publishing it to our live project. So in other words, he's actually publishing it to this application here, that is customer application, right? Great. So there our publishing is going on. Publish started, connecting, and copying, yes, and publishing, yes, and done, succeeded. Great, right? So let us go to IIS and let us start browsing the site. Let us see that if really our authentication authorization is working or not. So I've clicked on browse here. So there it is opening the site, and it says access denied. Now this was not expected. Why? Because access denied is not given on the home controller, right? So the first time when it comes and hits here, it actually hits the home controller. So remember, in our URL routing, we said that if you don't specify any kind of name on the controller here, it will open up the home controller, and the home controller really does not have any kind of access, right? So why it is giving here access denied? Okay. Now we need to do a couple of steps in IIS. Remember I said you at the end of the day, definitely in the web config file we have said that you have to use authentication, Windows authentication, but also in the IIS you need to go and specify that this application will run in Windows authentication. So you can see that I have selected the customer application here. You can see that we have a authentication icon here. So let us double click on this authentication icon. So here I will say, okay, first thing, enable Windows authentication. You can see over here. Again, let me repeat. Here is a customer application website. Click on this authentication icon and right click on this Windows authentication thing here and say enable, and go to this anonymous authentication and disable it, because we do not want any kind of anonymous person coming to the site, and we want that Windows authentication should be enabled. So this is the last step again which you have to do. So let me again go back to my site here. So let me go back to my site. Let me quickly go and restart the site once, because I've done some changes here. It is just psychological actually. I think you won't need a restart, but I've just done a restart here by clicking on this restart here. And let me go and click on browse again. Let us see what happens. So there my application is running and it is right. You can see that now first thing is I should be able to hit the home controller without giving any kind of user ID and password, right? And that is right. But the time I go and click on add new customers, it pops up me a Windows security box here saying that please do give your Windows credentials here. And if I give anything wrong here, it actually does not allow me to go in, right? But if I give a proper username and password, remember it was questpond and the password. So once I give a proper username and a password, it allows me to go in. So that was a simple implementation of Windows authentication. Remember, in Windows authentication, the users are validated from the Windows ADS or from the Windows local user groups. Now Windows authentication is good, when you have intranet kind of a scenario. Intranet kind of a scenario means, when you belong to an organization and the organization has the control over Windows ADS. But what about those scenarios, where a user is stored into SQL Server, or a user is stored into, let us say, Oracle. So if you have a custom data source and your users and your authentication and authorization data is stored into that custom data source, then you need to use forms authentication. Forms authentication is for internet kind of application. Internet kind of application means where the user comes to your site, he registers himself, and then he goes and signs in, right? So forms authentication is when you have a custom data source. Okay. So what we'll do is, let us go to our SQL Server table and let us create a simple user table called as TBL user, and we will have two fields in that, username and a password, and then we will try to implement forms authentication. So there I have opened my customer DB. Remember, in that we had created a TBL customer with records. So let me go and create a new table here called as TBL users. So I'm going to go and click on new table, and I'm going to create two fields here. One is username, the other one is password. So I'm going to create here username and varchar 50, and the other field is password and varchar 50, control S, TBL user. Great. And in this TBL user, let me go and add 2-3 users here. So let me right click, let me say edit, and let me add, so like user Shiv, Raju, right? Great. Now the next logical step would be to go and create a simple login screen, where the end user comes and he puts in his username and password and the validation is done. But remember that, as I've said previously, at the end of the day, the screens, or I'll say the views, get invoked from the controller, right? So the first hit comes to the controller. So the logical way to start would be to go and create a login controller. So if you remember, we already had various kinds of controller created. Just very quickly, you can see that we had a customer controller, which has add customer, search customer. Then we have the home controller, which actually helps you to navigate to about us. It helps you to navigate to the customer screens, right? So we would like to go and create here a controller now called as login controller. So that will help us to do security like login, logout, etc. So let me go and add a controller here. So let us go and add a controller. So let's right click on this, say add a controller, add a controller. We'll take an empty controller at this moment. And remember, you never delete that word controller from there. So login, add. Now, before I move ahead, give me 2 minutes to talk about modular development. At this moment, if you see, we have 3 modules. One is we have the home module, then we have the customer module, and we have the login module. And for every module, I have created a controller. Now, probably this is not the best way to do modular development in MVC. We have something called as areas, MVC areas, which we will discuss in the next video, where I will talk in more details about how you can go and create proper modules in MVC. But at this moment, this is fine. But in the next video, you can have a look at MVC areas, where I will properly talk about how we can go and divide our MVC project into proper modules. So now the end user comes and he hits this login controller here, and let us say he goes and he hits a method here called as authenticate. Okay. Now, as soon as he hits this method here called as authenticate, it will actually go and invoke a view. So let me go and add a view here called as login view. So this is my login view here, and we'll not worry about the partial views at this moment, and I'll say add. So in this screen, let us go and create a very simple HTML form here. Okay, so I'm going to go and put the form tag, and inside this form tag we're going to have one text box which is for username. So username, there is one text box for username, and I'm going to go and take this text here, right? The other text box is for the password, so a BR tag. I can just do a Control-C, Control-V for now, and this is for the password. And we also need one submit button, right? So again, let me go to view toolbox here, and I'm going to go and put a submit button. Great. Okay, so we have a very simple login screen here, which is having a username, a password, and a submit button. And once the user clicks on the submit, this form will be posted. Okay, so method is equal to post, right? Will be posted to a action. Okay, to an action called as validate. So the end user comes in and he puts in the username and a password, and he clicks submit. Now this data has to be sent to the server, right? It has to be sent to this validate action, which is present in the login controller. Now, in order to send data to the server, it cannot be ID, it has to be name here. So we're going to go and change this. I think I've already discussed about the difference between ID and name in the previous videos, right? So I will not repeat that again. So here I'll say, okay, this is username and this is password. Great, right? And now the next thing is we need to go and create a validate action here, right? So when the end user goes and clicks and sends data, that is a username and password, it will come and hit here. So I'll say here, okay, go and hit this validate action. And over here, we are going to do the forms authentication, right? So here we'll write the code for forms authentication. So in this validate action, we need to go and hit our SQL server. Remember, we had created a table here. So we need to go and hit this SQL server here, go to this TBL user and see that if the username and password what is entered from the UI is proper or not. So for that, we need to use entity framework. Okay. So first thing is we need to go and create a simple user class and map that user class by using entity framework to our TBL user table, right? So again, let us go back to our data access layer. Remember, we had said that at the end of the day, entity framework has two kinds of classes. One is you need to create a model, and the other one is you need to create a data access layer. So let us first start with the model, and then we will create the data access layer. So let me go to the model here and let me add a new class here. So I'm going to go and add a new item, and I'm going to go and add a class with the name user. Okay. So let us go and add a class here. Let me go and search the template. Let's add a class here with the name user.cs. So now in the user class, let us go and create two properties here. One is the username. Now you can see here, I'm using the prop code snippet. Code snippets are nothing but, they are templates. So for example, rather than writing public string and then the property name, what you can do is you can say here prop, and then you can say tap like this. Okay. So that makes your work more easy. So this is password, right? So if you remember, our table had two properties here, username and password. So there it is, username and password. Great. Now in entity framework, we have two parts. Remember, we said previously, one is the model and the other one is the context. In case again I'm repeating, if you are new to Entity Framework, please go and see the Entity Framework questions and answers video series where we have explained Entity Framework in more details. So let us go to our data access layer and let us create the context class. Now if we go to our data access layer, if you remember, we already had this customer DAL, right? Now rather than going and creating one more DAL here saying login DAL and then home DAL, right? How about just renaming this to just DAL, data access layer, right? And from this data access layer you can get customers, you can get users, you can get whatever you wish, right? So from this data access layer I'm going to say, okay, you can get customers as well as you can get users. Great. Now also we need to go and specify the mapping between the class and the table name. So if you remember, our table name is tbl user, right? So we need to go and say here model builder.entity, so map the user with the table tbl user, right? Now because we have changed this class name from customer DAL to DAL, a lot of things are going to crash in a program, right? So let us go and build our solution once here and let us go and rectify this change what we have done. So down below we're going to get a lot of errors. Let us wait. So there it is. It is saying that customer DAL cannot be found, definitely because we have changed it to DAL, right? So I'm going to go here and say, okay, this is actually DAL now. Okay, this is also DAL. Let me go and correct everywhere. DAL, right? Oh, I could have done a replace, but that is fine. Let me change this. This process is also termed as refactoring. Refactoring is a process, where what you do is that you go and you improve your code. So this is like improving my code at this moment. So I'm going to rebuild again. Let us see if errors are removed. Yeah, there it is again. Okay, this is fine. Namespace, what is this? Okay. Oh, DAL. Oh, bad, right? Now what has happened is our namespace is DAL and our class name is also DAL, right? So that is really a problem. Fine. So at this moment, let us keep it as it is. DAL.DAL. So we have to do a qualification here. That's fine. DAL.DAL and DAL.DAL. So I'm going to just go and qualify the class name. So this error here says that, just quickly, in case somebody is wondering what is this, remember that our namespace name is DAL and our class name is also DAL, right? So that's why that correction is. So I have to go and specify the namespace name qualified with the class name. So let me go and rebuild this solution again. So we have that one error, and that is, this error is fine because here we have still not written the code, right? And also let me do one small thing here. You can see the name of this file name is customer DAL, so let me go and rename this so that we have DAL everywhere. So I'm going to say DAL.cs, right? Great. Good. So we have fixed a lot of things, we have corrected, but the most important thing what we have done is we have created a user class and we have created a data access layer which can populate the user class. Now we would like to go and use that user class and do the validation inside this validate action here. So the first thing would be to get the username and password inside a string here. So I'll say, okay, username request.form. Remember, you can always go and create a strongly typed model object and pass here. That is all up to you. But at this moment, I will just take request.form. So remember, request.form username means he's going to give me this data here. And the second one is request.form password. So again, let me go and create one more variable here, string password and request.from password, right? So whatever the user has typed in the login screen, I'm getting that data in these two variables. And now I will go and query the data access layer to check, if these users are existing in the database or not, right? So I will say here very quickly. So first thing, again, if you want to go and access the data access layer, we need to definitely import data access layer. So we have to say here dal, it is hello world.dal. See, these namespaces have not changed, huh? So we will change that later on, but for now let us not get into it. So I have to say here using hello world.dal, right? So the next thing is I need to go and create the object of my data access layer. So I'll say data access layer dal is equal to new data access layer dot dal. We will do the tidying up, the tidying up later on. I know that it is so bad to see that dal.dal, dal.dal, right? But don't worry on that part, you know, I do understand. But we'll do the tidying up, the refactoring later on. At this moment, let us try to complete this module. So I'll say here, okay, get me list of user. I'll tell you what I'm doing. So get me list of user. Now again, remember, our users are belonging to the models, right? So we need to go and say here, yes, get me access to the models as well. So I'll say, okay, list of user, okay, users is equal to data access layer dot users, right, dot to list, right? But we cannot just do like this, right? Because what will happen if we do like this, we'll get all the users in our collection, which is of no sense, right? What we want is we want to get only that user, you know, who has this username and password, right? So for that we need to go and query this collection. So the best way to query the collection is by using link queue. So I'm going to say here from, remember the word flow starts with a from, then it has a where clause, right? So from u in data access layer dot users, okay, where u dot username is equal to the str username, sorry, the username what I have at the top here, right? And so I'm going to go and put also an and clause here, right? And u dot password is equal to password, right? So whatever is this thing, please go and give me a list of user, right? Now you can see that there are a couple of errors here. So these errors, let's try to rectify it. One is that it is not just equal to, actually it is equal to, so that is one thing. And the second thing is we need to also write the select. So in other words, it is flows from where and then the s, right? So we have not given the s, so let us do that as well. So I'll say here select u, right? Great. And what I'll also do is, you know, just a quick tidy up. So for example, what if you put some kind of a space, you know, at the back and front, you know, for example, if you type shift and then press a space bar. So let me also go and trim so that any kind of leading and trailing spaces are removed, right? Great. So I'm going and querying the data access layer. I'm taking these values and querying, and I'm returning back a list of users. Now in case if that user is found with the proper username and password, then that user would be available in this collection. So in other words, I'll say this is a valid user when this users count. So when this users count, so users.count, if it is greater than 1, or I'll say equal to 1 actually, then this is a valid user, or else, you know, he is an invalid user. So if he is an invalid user, then please return him back to the login page again, right? And if he is a valid user, then he has the full right to go to the home page, right? Now home page, let us look at what is the name of the home page. Let us quickly see. So home page name is it is in the shared folder actually. So in the shared folder, it is with the name go to home. Okay, so let us make it go to home.chhtml. Okay, good. Right, so here we have the logic. It says that if the user is proper, he will go to the home page. If he is not, then he will go to login page. Now one more thing what we need to do here is we need to go and set the cookie. So we need to say here forms authentication dot set cookie, set auth cookie, you know, to some name here and true. Okay, so I'll talk about this, what this set auth cookie does. I'll talk about that later on. Now this forms authentication class actually belongs to the system.web.security. So you can see here at the end of the day, everything comes from system.web, right? Because it is coming from ASP.NET. So this is very important here. I'll talk about why we are setting the cookie here. So basically, if the user is valid, he comes here, he sets the cookie, he sets it to true, and he goes to the go to home page. Nice. So I'll talk about this cookie later on. Now there is one more important change which is pending to complete this forms authentication, and that is making changes to the web config file. Because at this moment, this project is configured to do Windows authentication, right? So let us go back to our web config file and let us go and change that mode to forms authentication. So let me go here, and over here I'll say that the authentication mode is no more Windows, it is forms. And we also need to go and provide the startup action, the startup controller. So you can see here I've set authentication mode equal to forms, and I'm saying that the login URL, in other words the login page, will actually come from the home controller, and it will come from the login controller. I'm sorry. So it will come from the login controller, and we need to go and hit the authenticate action, right? Authenticate. And what does this authenticate do? Very quickly, we have still not done that code as well. This authenticate will return the view login. Great. Now, before we go ahead and run this program, there are a couple of more points which are pending. You remember, in the Windows authentication, we had used the authorize attribute, right? So this authorize attribute is still needed, but at this moment, we don't need to go and specify the users over here. Okay, means we don't have to specify the usernames over here or the user groups. Why? Because the authentication will be done now by that code right over there. So this is one point. So and what we'll also do is we'll also go and decorate the home controller as well. In other words, even to come to the home page, you will need authentication. Okay, so let us go to the home controller, and even the home now needs authentication and authorization, right? But what I've done is the login controller can be hit by anyone. It can be invoked by anyone. Why? Because we want that the user should see the login page. This point is very important. Again, I repeat, the login controller can be invoked by anyone. So on this login controller, I have not put any kind of authorized attribute, but on the home controller and the customer controller, we do have the authorized attribute. So in other words, any unauthorized person cannot enter the home and the customer controller, but yes, they can enter the login controller. They can go and put the usernames and password, right? Great. And there is one more point, which is pending. In the user class, right, we need to go and specify the key. Remember I said entity framework needs a key. So over here as well, one more point, which was pending is we need to go and specify the key. Remember in our customer class also previously, we had specified a key, right? This key is needed, in any ORM. So because we are using entity framework now, we need to specify that which of the fields, which one of the fields is a key. So this is again an important step. And the last step, which we have missed out actually is we have changed our data access layer, right? So if you remember, our data access layer first name was customer DAL, but now we have made it DAL. So what we also need to do is in the web.config file, if you remember in our web.config file, the connection string is looked up by the name of the class. So because we have changed the name of the class, we also need to go and change this. Okay, so these all things are more of an impact analysis which has happened because of the name of the class change. Okay, great. So now let us do a Control F5 here. Now remember, in our routing, we had specified that the first page, which will be hit, or the first action which will be hit, is the home action. So if you remember, right, in the route config file, if you don't go and specify any URL, he will actually come and hit the home/index action. But now, because the home controller is authenticated, right, is authorized, you can see that he points him to the login screen. Great, isn't it? So if I and second, again, very important point, before I move ahead, if I try to directly go and invoke enter search, or let's say enter, if I try to do this, again, because the customer controller is authorized, what happens is, here also he will redirect me to the login page. So we can see now that our complete application is secured. So he cannot go and enter into any action, which is marked with the authorized attribute. Okay, good. So everything is working. So if I say here shave, and if I say here shave, and if I say submit, there it is. It goes here. I can add a new customer, I can search, etc. Right? Good. So now let us quickly go and revise all the steps once. So first thing is, you need to go to the web config file and you have to say that the authentication mode is equal to forms. The second step is, you need to go and create this login page and create a corresponding action which will be invoked. Third, in your login controller, right, you need to go and write the logic to check the user, it exists or not, and then you need to call this forms authentication dot set auth cookie, right? So these are the three primary important steps, which you need to follow if you want to implement forms authentication. Now, before I complete the session, let me talk about this sentence here, forms authentication dot set auth cookie, because this is a very, very important sentence. First, let me explain what exactly is a cookie. A cookie is nothing but it is a temporary storage inside a browser where we can store information regarding a particular user. So, why do we need to store information that the user has been authenticated? Okay. So now once the validation is done, right, we do not want the end user to see the login page again and again. So we go and write the information in this cookie saying that this user is authenticated and don't ask him for the login page again and again. In other words, for example, let me do a control F5 here. If you see here, he has not asked me for a login page. Why? Because in the cookie, already the information is written saying that the user has been authenticated and don't asking for the login page again and again. Okay. For example, if you go here, so let us go to settings and just let us go and search for cookie here. I'm using Google Chrome, and if you go and see cookie, okay, there it is, all cookies and site data. So let us see this. You will see that somewhere I should get localhost. You can see that. So this localhost is my site name at this moment, right? Now, definitely, this site name should be questmon.com or something, but at this moment, because we are running via the localhost, it is showing me here. So you can see, because of this cookie, this ASPX auth cookie over here, he knows that this user has been validated, right? If I go and delete this cookie, for example, if I go and say here delete, okay, remove all shown. Okay, so if I do this and if I go back again here and if I do a reload, you can see, because the cookie has been deleted, he again asks me for the login page. And this is proper, right? Because think about this, you do a validation, you go inside this page here, and if you try to go and surf some other controller, for example, if you try to go and surf the search controller, why should I be asked for the login page again? Because already I put the username and password. So by writing that in the cookie, we don't get the prompt of login again and again. Okay, and in case you want to give an expiry date to the cookie, you can always do that. Now, just quickly, before I end the session, this authentication and authorization is not really the concept of MVC. Okay, it is the concept of the main ASP.NET, and I'm sure that people who are seniors, who are watching this video, they already know about forms authentication and Windows authentication. But in case you are still confused about the cookies, how can we make it cookieless and etc., please go and watch this video series in the ASP.NET Q&A series, where we have explained authentication, where we have explained authorization. So there are 6-part videos here, and these 6-part videos go very much in depth in explaining you authentication and authorization. So these concepts like cookies and cookieless and how to go about doing it, this complete video series will help you to do that. So that brings us to the end of lab 16. In lab 17, we'll talk about something called as areas. So that won't be a big video, but approximately a 10-15 minutes video. But it is very important, to talk about areas, because there we are going to talk about something called as modular development, how to go and create modules in MVC. Good. So we have more 9.5 hours still pending. So it's almost a day has finished, right? So good. And again, very important thing here, we would like to know on which lab you are on. So what you can do is, do go to Facebook/questpond, and if possible, do post here saying that, okay, I just completed lab 12, I just completed lab 16, right? So with that, what happens is, we come to know that how many people are watching our labs and till what level they have reached. Okay, thank you so much. So in lab 17, we're going to talk about areas.